For the past few seasons, the Specialized Gravity team has been at the center of attention thanks to the prototype bikes they have piloted to numerous World Cup victories. Specialized has spared no expenses or efforts when it comes to developing their next downhill bike, and they've done a good job of keeping details about it fairly under wraps. The bike I'm holding here before me is what the team raced on the past 2 seasons. No, it is not the bike they're riding this year. We asked if we could ride that bike. Specialized said that is reserved for Loic, Jordan, and Finn at this time. However, there is a lot to be learned from what the team did with this bike that's helped influence the frame that's preceded it. So over the next few days, we're going to ride the bike to find out what makes it so damn fast, as well as chat with Specialized to get more insight into the design and what's to come from this project in the future. Obviously we have one prototype bike to ride, and myself and Ryan both need to ride it. So he's gonna go first today. I'll ride it tomorrow. But before we get into how this bike rides on trail, I want to go through what makes it so special, and we have Steve from Specialized with us. Let's start from just why are we still talking about this bike and riding it if the team isn't racing it this year?
For sure, yeah. I think this whole program is really just a bunch of development that we're doing on this downhill bike project, and this is a really relevant piece of the puzzle. The guys raced this bike for a couple of years, and it's obviously led to an evolution of what they're riding today. We're not quite ready to show you guys that bike, but we know you guys like, and your audience like to nerd out on cool prototype bikes like this, so we really wanted to get you on it and kind of see what you thought of how it rides and how it kind of influences where we're going with the bike project.
Let's start broad, 10,000 feet above. Give us wheel size, some geo numbers, travel amounts, that good stuff.
For sure. The guys, the Gravity team guys, they're super preferential to mullet, so it's 29 front, 27 rear dedicated, 200 mil fork, of course, and then depending on the link configuration that we run, the travel varies a bit, but what you guys are going to ride today, it's about a 203 mil rear wheel travel. Head angle is 62.5 today, stack is 630, chainstay is 445, BB drop is 19 millimeters off the front axle.
So 445 on the chainstay. We're seeing other companies go a little bit longer. What's the philosophy between the front center and rear center ratio?
Absolutely. So the whole kind of theme of this bike, right, it's a race bike, it's speed, and really we want to give the riders, the athletes, a platform that's really neutral in terms of the handling, and that they can adjust their body position based on their suspension tuning and their characteristics. So we leave that to the capable hands of the Gravity team, but we really, like, with their feedback, give them a spot that's just right in the middle of their preferences and what they want out of the bike. It's really similar to like the approach we take with our OE shock tunes, for instance, right? Like, we want to give customers and riders a bike that's like right in the middle of the range so that you can tune either way. We don't ever want to be like up against a bookend. So we feel like the proportions of this bike with the race team feedback are really like what they need to get themselves in a comfortable and consistent position when they're racing.
Cool. Does that mean that there was just one size of this bike, and were riders, did they have adjustments to kind of get that balance they were looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of adjustments baked into this bike, and as we learn and as we get that feedback from the athletes, we can kind of strip them out or add new ones in. But there's a lot of adjustment in this bike in terms of front and rear center balance, and we can attack that in a lot of different ways, from the headset to the link configurations. This bike also has an eccentric bottom bracket that can do a lot of adjustment. So yeah, they've got a lot of levers to play with, so we can really like dial that stuff in. And then you see along the way as the bike evolves, those adjustments can change or they can go away once we're confident. But to answer your initial question, yes, there's one size of this bike, one main size, and then we can tweak and tune for each individual athlete to their preferences.
So speaking of kinematics, let's talk about how the bike brakes.
For sure. Yeah, I think we've done a lot of work on braking, and it's a really important, and I think maybe sometimes overlooked aspect of like how a bike rides, especially like a downhill bike, right? Like, you really want to be comfortable when you're braking. So with this bike, we're really shooting for, again, like that consistent feel when you're braking, and we don't want the rider to pitch forward. And really, so that's been like a big part of this development, is figuring out that anti-rise curve in a way that keeps the rider really in like a nice consistent position when they're braking heavily, right? Like, you don't want to be pitching forward when you're like hurtling downhill on a race run. So, or in a bike park lap. So yeah, just again, like trying to really keep it consistent and confident.
Cool. Like, what I see is we have a stiffener on the linkage, and then you have some optional stiffeners down here right below the shock. Are those the main things that you can adjust to adjust compliance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, those are the two main things that we can do on the bike, right? Of course, the engineering team is working hard to make sure that, again, we have like a nice neutral setting to start with, and then giving the athletes the ability to tune and kind of understand what those stiffness changes do on the front and the rear end of the bike, and then they can get the blend that they feel is best. And then you can see, like, on the new bike, maybe these adjustments aren't there, right? Because we've gotten that blend dialed in the way they like it. So we can use all these things as just tools to learn and just keep evolving the bike.
This bike has been developed for Specialized Gravity team, but as you guys work towards maybe a production bike someday, like, what does that mean for every everyday rider looking to ride this bike?
Yeah, for sure. It's something we're considering. I guess I would ask you the opposite though. It's like, why wouldn't you want Loic and Finn and Jordan's bike, right? It's like, these guys are the pinnacle of the sport. You know, what's good for them in a downhill bike, we feel like is going to be great for our everyday riders too.
She's going so fast.
Three things with the Specialized. The first is the compliance of the frame is very comfortable. I played with some of the stiffeners. They feel good. The bike feels peppier when you have them on, but if we're riding all day, I prefer the compliance of no stiffeners. The second is you almost get the suspension feeling of high pivot, but without the high pivot, which is super weird. And I think that's due to the Olin suspension allowing the rear wheel to actually move out of the way in time, but then additionally the additional compliance of the frame, that combo, really nice. Yet you can still feel the ground. You know where your tire is. That's quite useful and not always the case on very compliant bikes. Wouldn't call this very compliant. It's nicely balanced. And then the third thing is the front center and rear center aren't super long, but the anti-rise feels pretty low, which means the rear end tries to grab for traction as you're braking. And if your rear center is too long, sometimes you get thrown forward. My butt can stay right over the center of the rear center, so I'm never getting pushed forward while braking, yet I still get that braking traction. It's a pretty sweet combo.
Ryan rode this bike first. Today's the following day. I'm riding it second. Setup on this bike was pretty straightforward from what Specialized gave us. On the shock, I really didn't do anything. We're, interestingly enough, running rebound fully closed, and it is plenty fast enough still. Olin's fork, I've ridden these a little bit in the past and like did basically recommended pressure and a little bit over on the ramp up to give it some bottom out support. Other than that, of all the bikes that we've been riding this week and testing and stuff, this one has required the least amount of faffing around for me just to feel comfortable on. I would say in the first couple of laps I've done now, it's very predictable, it's stable, and I feel really neutral over it. It's definitely a race bike. Like, it's decently stiff, not necessarily in a bad way, but it feels like it has a minimum speed limit, but it's comfortable, like the way I just fell over the bike and everything. And I'm excited for tomorrow. I'm going to finish up my time on the bike, and I don't really think I'm going to mess with anything suspension wise, more play around with some of the stiffener options we have just out of curiosity and continue kind of feeling out the frame. Like, I think the frame itself has some of the most just easy to understand, like what the bike's going to do in a lot of situations. And then the suspension design drives really well through bumps and has a lot of ground feel where it feels like the wheel is always able to get out of the way. And then braking, it's really active. I think I can pretty much shut down about as late as I want in a lot of sections. So I know it feels so freaking cliche to just be like, oh my God, like this race bike is such a race bike, but it really has been pretty shocking, like how fast I've been able to go kind of right off the bat. And again, like I'm 5 days into riding the bike park, my arms are definitely pretty tired, and that hasn't mattered. So stay tuned.
So the Specialized, I think, impressed both of us.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing to note was I got the bike set up in 2 runs, which was pretty cool. First off, there aren't a lot of adjustments. We were told to run the shock as is. I just had to adjust rebound, and then I matched the fork to it and felt right at home. It's not too long of a bike. It's also not too short. It's kind of this nice sweet spot of, you know, we rode a lot of bikes and sometimes you're quite stretched out and sometimes you feel a little cramped. For my height, that was perfect for me.
I would agree. I mean, that's what stood out the most was how easy this bike was to get on and ride. And the word that kind of kept coming back to me was I was so balanced and so neutral over it. There's not a ton of adjustments we had. You know, there's production bikes that have all the flip chips and all the things to do. And that simplicity of, hey, here's the shock with the bike, maybe run it with these compression settings. Here's the fork, set the air pressure. It was nice that we didn't need options, but also made it so simple, I think, for us both just to kind of get on and ride it as it is. Geo-wise, like you're saying, I just felt like I could almost do no wrong. I was like almost always in this position to just react from, and the reach felt nice. The rear chainstay isn't super long, but never felt too short. The bike is big enough to be stable, but not too big to be boring or a big effort to move around. It was very unique in all those ways where it just, yeah, like so much comfort and puts you in the headspace to like, oh, I can kind of just like do whatever I want. I can look at the trail the way I wish. And it took 2 runs to do that, which is crazy. Also with the frame, my experience was that the frame matched with the Olin suspension that I would say has almost like a minimum speed you have to ride it at.
Yeah.
And then there isn't really a ceiling to how fast you can push it. The frame was the same way for me. Just cruising the first half lap, especially on lower angle trails, so the bike isn't gonna feel as good anyways. I could feel that the bike wanted to be pushed harder, but as I got up to speed and I was riding faster and faster, there wasn't moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like I drove all this energy into like a bomb hole and things are starting to kind of like flex out on me, or just the consistency of what the bike's gonna do always remain the same.
Yeah, and then to add on top of that, like one of the reasons that can happen is we have some stiffeners on the bike.
Yep.
You know, they definitely were shooting for a certain range of frame stiffness, and then like, okay, on top of that, can we make it more stiff and then a little bit less stiff, and then see what the best combination is. We ended up playing with the down tube stiffener the most.
Yep.
And felt fine. I don't know, like
I didn't notice a whole lot, if I'm being honest.
I probably convinced myself that it was peppier.
I felt a heck of a lot cooler with it in there because people could see it's an option, but that's about it, you know? I don't know if maybe my abilities and having whatever 10 laps on the bike, it was fine with or without.
It was, yeah, exactly. I ended up riding it without just because I'm like, well, again, I still have to ride this thing all like for a while.
Yeah.
And I was having no issues with it being overly compliant. I really liked the way it felt. And speaking of the compliance, like I'd love to just walk through, like, you know, compliance is a pretty hot topic these days.
Totally.
This frame is pretty unique in how it achieves it. Now, normally you can just reduce the stiffness of all of your tubes and then your frame is more compliant. And then once it gets too compliant, you're like, okay, the thing's starting to wind up, let's go back up in stiffness. Now your frame is compliant. That's where most companies are gonna end up. And what's neat about this bike is you have this giant chainstay. Now, if we think about a dirt bike, they pretty much just have chainstays. And if you look at, you know, slow-mo of how the rear end of a dirt bike is flexing, the rear wheel is, you know, rolling from side to side about that giant chainstay. What's cool about when a bike complies in the rolling direction is that your contact patch is always staying in the same direction.
Yep.
It's never starting to, you know, curl off to the side and like throw your bike over.
Or kick out and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's neat about having a decent amount of what I thought was roll on this bike is it's also limited by having this more compliant seat stay. Like this bike in particular, this is the Enduro seat stay. Like, literally the Enduro seat stay to make this prototype. And we don't have the stiffener in the upper link. And so what that means is you can kind of imagine it as you have roll happening in the bike, and then that roll is limited by the seat stay essentially catching the wheel and making sure it can't roll too much. The other thing that I think is really important to mention about this bike is this bike has a decently low anti-rise. At least that's what it feels like. It's not super low, like you don't ever get pitched, but the way that the tire grabs for traction when you're braking indicates that it's doing that. Also, the linkage layout kind of indicates that it's doing that. So that's sweet because, again, you can slow down before you get to a corner. You can brake later and slow down quicker. This has, because it's shorter, the rear center shorter and the front center shorter than some of the modern downhill bikes, you can make sure that when you're going into that steep section and you're grabbing the brake, I wouldn't say it pitches, but it doesn't squat, it rises slightly and grabs for traction, which again, I prefer, but you have plenty of arm travel so that, you know, you're never gonna top out on arm travel, and you can keep your butt over the rear center a bit more than some other bikes so that it actually keeps that rear end from being able to propel you forward.
Totally.
So you can kind of manage it with your hips over the rear end of the bike.
I think that's visible in a lot of the clips of us riding, you know, and in the way you see Loic, really, like and Finn, you know, like they're both maybe a little bit more like flatter back, but hips are back for sure.
Yeah.
And they're very active with like the way they're moving over the bike.
Yeah.
It's like it was an interesting blend of being so smooth and plush, but also letting you know kind of like where the rear wheel was, and you're still like feeling those bumps just a little bit, which I thought was really nice because you always can kind of like read where the rear end of the bike is and if the dirt's changing, or, you know, you can predict what's going to happen as well.
Yep.
The other thing that really stood out about the suspension on this bike and just how it performed was you had a lot of platform and support, but it never was harsh, and I was using full travel. So kind of the similar way to the V10 that we've tested, where you can be almost at any point in the stroke, and if there's something you want to get the bike over, you can always wait a little bit more to kind of spring over things. The same can be said when you're kind of just going through a normal rough trail. Yes, the bike's driving forward, but it also maintains a lot of speed. You don't feel like you're cycling through the stroke so much. A feeling that I'm learning that I really love. When a bike's comfortable and it can handle just going head first into things, but at the same time, it has that response to kind of keep your speed going on trails that just aren't just giving you that free speed or have the pitch necessary for that.
Talking about suspension, one sensation that I had, it reminded me of when I rode a few high pivot bikes of like, okay, the wheel just moves out of the way. Done. That's the job of a high pivot bike. Like if you go from low pivot bike to mid pivot bike, same shock, same leverage, same bike, same chassis. If you're gonna hit a bump, the mid pivot bike is probably gonna allow the wheel to move out of the way more easily. But if that frame's really, really stiff and stout, it can still be a harsh ride. This bike gave me a high pivot sensation without the change in rear center. So my weight distribution was consistent as I cornered. But the wheel very easily and clearly moved out of the way. And the edge, whatever we want to call that, the harshness,
shock of bumps
was taken off. Just like going from low pivot to mid pivot, you take the edge off. The edge of the impact was taken off, and it seemed like from the compliance of the frame. So you can have high pivot, but there's other ways to do that. And this does a really good job of that without having an idler. Like there's no complexity.
All right, that concludes our 2 days getting to ride this bike. After having this opportunity to ride this prototype Specialized frame, what are your final thoughts?
I'd buy this bike as is, and it's a prototype, which means there's probably even more refinement to come. So that's quite encouraging, but well done.
Yep. Yeah, it's very saddening that we have to hand this back off to Steve at Specialized. We'll never have the chance to ride this exact bike again, but they have another bike. It means that a production version is coming down the line soon enough. Might not be this exact one, but I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of promise with what they've created with just this first version.
And if you're slow on this, you're slow. Rat.
Wait, get my podium.
Oh, on the...
Yeah, this is actually pretty heavy.